Hello, everyone. So first of all, I just want to say thanks to the people who subscribed after my last video. It's nice to have some subscribers that I don't personally know. That's always kind of fun. So today I'm going to be talking about this video that I saw recently, which came out apparently 2 months ago. And it's by a YouTuber who is currently a believing Mormon, but who appears to have been through a faith crisis in the past. And because of that, he believes that he understands why people, particularly younger people like millennials, are leaving the church. And he thinks that there are three main things that contribute to millennials and people in general, perhaps, leaving the church. And he calls these things the three nails in the coffin when it comes to Mormonism. So let's get into it and see what he has to say.
All right, the nail number one um, is just like church history, teachings, doctrines, practices. So this is when you get into church history stuff like Adam God theory, the Kinderhook plates, the seer stone, the Book of Abraham, polygamy, blacks in the priesthood. Just lots of the disturbing kind of the. So what this first stake that I'm talking about, which is again church history, policies, practices, teachings, doctrines. That's kind of the first stake or nail in the coffin. That's the first wrecking ball that's going to hit you as a young Mormon. And you're going to be super disturbed by these things the more and more you study them. So you're going to start learning all of these super difficult, controversial things that the church denies that it's hiding, but essentially, effectively, the church is hiding these things through, or was. To understand why people are leaving in context, you have to understand that. Now, people have compared that first stake, that first wave, as books on a shelf. They say, you can only put so many doubts on the bookshelf, and the more stuff you put on the shelf eventually is going to give, and the floodgate's going to open. Okay.
Now, so far, I agree with him. I think that church history, doctrine, practices, when you study far enough into them, are disturbing and disturb a lot of people to the point where they lose their testimony. And so I agree with him on this point, and I think that this is a good analysis of why many people leave. However, in his opinion, this isn't the only main reason why people are leaving.
But that's only one pillar. That's not the reason people are leaving. Okay? That will crush people's testimonies, that will all these things. People do leave, of course, for those things, but that's actually, if you think that's the problem, you still don't fully understand. So let's go on to nail number two, the second nail in the coffin. It's how the church has actually acted and behaved in the real world. So now we're not talking about teachings or policies or practices or doctrines or revelations or church history. Now we're not talking about that. Now we're talking about something entirely different. How the church is actually behaving when the rubber meets the road, when it's confronted with real social issues. How does the church and its leadership and Mormons in general, how do they behave socially? Right? Geez Louise, I mean, the list goes on and on and on when it comes to actual real world issues that the church is getting wrong.
So in this part of the video, the things he talks about are interracial marriage, the civil rights movement, gay marriage, things like that, where he feels that the church has not reacted well to changes in society, I would say. And I feel like this defining this as being the social issues that the church is dealing with and facing, I would say is too narrow of a scope. If I was going to divide up the problems people have with the church into categories, I would probably put some of the policies of the church over there in the social issues category, because I think when you have a policy that says no one who's black can hold the priesthood or enter the temple, that's a social issue. And so for me, I take issue with his categorization here, but that's really a minor point.
Then the third one is totally personal, just to you. How is the church treating you while you're dealing with these things? This is the biggest and most painful nail in the coffin. That's why I call it the final nail. Believe it or not, this nail dwarfs the first nail. Believe it or not. And it's way larger than the second nail. It's like they go up in size every time. This is the final nail. This is when the church is actually connecting to you personally and dealing with you personally as you experience nail 1 and nail 2. See, this is where you're going to be ostracized. This is where you're going to be treated like an apostate or an anti-Mormon. This is where you're going to be told that the reason that you're having these doubts is because you're secretly masturbating or into pornography.
So this is the part of the video that I start to really disagree with him, and it's because I just don't believe that for most people, the way the church reacts to people that have doubts is as much of a problem as the things that are causing those doubts in the first place. Because I think that for most people who are going to lose their testimony, they lose it by themselves, looking by themselves at issues that do not make sense to them. I don't think most people actually, who are in the process of losing their testimonies of the church, actually go through a phase where they start publicly talking about what they're thinking and feeling. I just don't think that happens very often.
This is personal because this is when you are actually interfacing with church leaders or trusted church members or mentors or maybe actual leadership, maybe institute directors, maybe general authorities. Like I talked to institute directors and general authorities when I was going through this process.
See, I think that he is taking his own experience and overgeneralizing. I don't think most people who have the sort of doubts that he has are in a position where they feel like they can even talk to general authorities. I don't feel like that's something that most people do. So then he gets into a conversation that an imaginary conversation that sort of mirrors conversations that I guess he's had with people about his doubts, where he's trying to talk about some church history issue, and they keep telling him he's being led by Satan, he's sinning, he's focusing on the wrong things, he doesn't have the Spirit with him. And they're not going to talk about the issue because it's not pertinent to his salvation. And they go through all these excuses why that's not really the issue is him.
It's this dance. I've been through this, oh my gosh, probably hundreds of times with all sorts of church leaders and church people. And it is the most painful, grueling. The church, people are actually like it's like mental torture. It's like the ultimate form of gaslighting.
So this is just my opinion, but I think most people who consider having those conversations kind of know in advance what those conversations are going to go like, and so they don't have those conversations. I think his experience is unusual because most of us don't actually try to have those conversations with leaders to watch things like that play out.
What's even maybe potentially more painful is when they do start to talk about the issues with you, but they do the apologetic dance.
So to me, it was really interesting to hear him say that because in my mind, I'm listening to him talk about this conversation, and then I'm listening to him describe the kind of apologetics he doesn't want, and I can't help thinking, well, how did you expect this conversation to go? What did you expect from having this conversation with your leaders? Did you expect them to just say, you're right, this was wrong, and I don't know why it happened or how to explain it? Do you expect them to react that way to church history issues? Because if that's your best case scenario for what's going to happen in this conversation, then why even have the conversation?
And so when when someone like me, when my generation, we go through these nails in the coffin. The final nail is when we personally are rejected or punished or excommunicated or disfellowshipped or whatever, merely for having the doubts.
So he says, when someone like me, and then he says, or someone in my generation, goes through these issues. But the thing is, I don't think most people in his generation are actually like him in this way. I think most people, when they experience these difficulties with church history, I think for most people who are going to lose their testimony at all, that is enough to make them lose their testimony. I don't think most of them need to go through whatever the church can inflict on them personally in order to come to the conclusion that the church is false.
So my thing would be, if people in the church office building, if church leadership, whatever, if they want to stop the hemorrhage, which it can be stopped, because all this church history, believe it or not, and I don't care what John DeLynn, I love John DeLynn, but I don't care what people say, whether it's him or any ex-Mormon. Oh, well, if the church was honest about its history, it would just collapse. It would cease to exist. That's not true. That's not true. You can be honest, 100% transparent, without using ridiculous apologetics and games, and people will stick. People will stick around. Remember, it's the 3 pillars. It's not just the first one. It's the 3 pillars. That's why people leave. If you're authentic about those things, 100%, people will not leave. They won't. It's the other 2 pillars that really put the nail in the coffin. It's these other 2 things. That is what I really wished people on both sides, Mormons and ex-Mormons, that's what I wished people would understand.
So this is where he gets to what I would say is the point of his video. And this is where I think there's a lot to unpack and where I disagree with him the most. Because he really thinks that the church would do fine, or at least do a lot better than it's currently doing, if it would just be open and transparent about its history. And I think that that is absolutely not true. I think that the history of the church alone is causing the church to hemorrhage members. And I think that that history will not go away and is a real problem. And I think that when I listen to the stories of people who left, when I read people on ex-Mormon subreddit talking about why they left, or people in ex-Mormon YouTube channels talking about why they left, I don't see people saying, oh, well, I left because I just tried to work my doubts out with my leaders and they couldn't stand it and I got offended and left. That's not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is it was the history itself, it was the doctrine itself that caused me to realize that this wasn't true. And I think that the church knows that this is what's going on, because recently the church has been cleaning up its gospel topics essays to make them less damning. I think it knows it can't be as transparent even as it was, because if it is, it's going to lose more members. I also think that it's a little bit frustrating to hear someone who hasn't left the church and who still appears to believe in the church say that he knows better than the people who have actually left the church why people are leaving the church. But I am glad that he has moved beyond, oh, they just wanted to sin or they were being led away by Satan, as reasons for why people are leaving. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on this video, and I'm just going to end with a clip from him where he says something that I basically agree with, even though he's still following his three-part model. I would say it's usually a one type of thing that causes people to leave. Sometimes it is social issues, mainly. Sometimes it is mainly historical issues. But whatever it is, I think people just need to lose their testimony. It doesn't have to be because all three things combine to make them lose their testimony. It certainly doesn't have to be because they were offended by church leaders being offended by them. But that aside, I think there's a lot of truth to what he says here, and so I'm just going to end with this.
We can demonize those who have left. We can call them unfaithful, ex-Mormons, apostates, whatever. We can say whatever we want about them, okay? Regardless, those three nails, those three pillars, those three stakes are going to remain because it's a genuine problem.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see the original video, check the link in the description. And please consider subscribing, commenting, liking, sharing this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.